Hello everyone, my name is Victor. I am the Occult Technician, and this is Mind War, Season 3, Episode 8. Mind War is sponsored by Victory Work Apparel. Use promo code Mind War. Join the Mind War today. Enlist at patreon.com/Mind War. Now back to the show. Welcome back to Mind War, folks. I appreciate you being here. We have a lot to cover today, so let's get started. So, folks, one of the first things that we learn through the Gateway Experience tapes, and Dr. Monroe teaches us how to become hypnotized. In the early tapes, he walks us through what we call Focus 10, where he's the one doing the hypnotizing, right? He counts from 1 to 10, gets us into Focus 10, and now we are hypnotized. Again, that word hypnosis simply means hypna, H-Y-P-N means sleep, and osis means state, so the state of being asleep. This is where our physical body is deep asleep, but our mind is wide awake. We are conscious while our physical body sleeps, right? We also learned the hypnagogic state. This is the process of falling asleep, the different steps that we go through as we fall asleep. And these terms are important. These are all things that we are learning as we work through Dr. Monroe's books and as we work through the Gateway Experience tapes. We're really looking at the different levels and layers of what it means to fall asleep, to be asleep, and we're trying to learn new skills by, again, staying awake, staying conscious while our body falls asleep. So I learned a new term this last week, and here's how it happened. So Leo and I, my best buddy Leo, my Boston Terrier, we were in the side yard throwing the ball, right? We were playing fetch. I was throwing the ball for him. And now the home that's right on the other side of my side lot there, it's an Airbnb, and it's always filled with some kind of family, right? They're coming for a sports event or a vacation or to visit other family members. So the home is always filled with vacationers, especially now that it's spring and summertime, right? And so it was in the late afternoon. Leo and I came inside the house, and I was ready to take a nap. So I lay down on the couch. I lay down on my right side with my right arm tucked in and my hand probably, I think, under the pillow, right? And so as I was laying there, Leo curled up at my feet, I heard the vacationers throwing one of those Nerf whistling footballs, right? The ones that have the little whistle attached to them. And I could hear the football going back and forth. And I remember playing with one of these when I was younger. And when I say younger, in my 20s at the beach in Southern California, just launching those Nerf footballs with the whistle as far as I could throw them. And so as I'm laying there falling asleep, my eyes are closed. I'm imagining myself back in the side yard where I just was a few minutes ago. But instead of throwing the ball, I was thinking how much fun it would be to throw one of those Nerf whistling footballs for Leo. And so as I'm laying there, and again, this is my imagination, but now I'm falling asleep. So it's kind of falling into that sleep and that dreamlike state, right? And I'm hearing the whistling football go back and forth in the distance. And as I get more and more tired, and I'm visualizing myself in my mind as I'm getting into this dream, all of a sudden my right arm forgot that I was laying on the couch and it tried to throw the football, right? And it woke me right up. My whole arm moved and moved from underneath my head, and it just shocked me. It woke me up. Now, I know that all of us have had this experience before, that as we're falling asleep, our body makes these movements that kind of take us out of it as we're falling into sleep, into this dream state, right? And so, of course, I thought, okay, we have the hypnosis, the hypnagogic state. We have, what is the definition for this? Is there a term for this process of your body moving? And sure enough, folks, there's a scientific term, and I really thought this one was funny, the hypnic jerk. That's right. So as you're falling asleep, if your body is twitching from you responding to something in the dream, it is called a hypnic jerk. And so what's happening is part of our hypnagogic state, one of those steps, right, is to receive that paralyzing chemical. We've talked about it, the GABA and glycine. This is the chemical that causes our body to go into a temporary paralysis so we don't act out our dreams, right? We talked about the sleep paralysis stories and how if your body wasn't paralyzed temporarily by this chemical, you'd be fighting off all the ghouls and goblins that you might run into. Or like I did, I would be throwing that football for Leo over and over again in my sleep, and you could possibly hurt yourself, right? So I thought that was an interesting term. I thought that was another definition, another word that we need to add to our arsenal as we study and work through Journeys Out of the Body by Dr. Robert Monroe. It's his first book. That's what we're working on here in Mind War Season 3. And folks, a lot of the chapters that we've gone through, the last several chapters, last few episodes, it's really been like we are reading from Dr. Monroe's dream journal. And again, remember, we're not taking these books as dogma. Dr. Monroe is not our new, clergy member. He's not some type of saint or something like that. He's a scientist who is experiencing these things and took some notes. We're not trying to recreate his experiences, but what we're trying to do is get an understanding of what other people are experiencing when they listen to the tapes, and maybe start to be able to categorize them so that when we share our stories with each other, if there are things that are familiar, we can say, okay, this is what you would normally experience while listening to the tapes, right? So in chapter 13, it's titled The Second Body. And I think this is important, and this is a great one to maybe take some notes on as you're reading it. We are going to start categorizing the different characteristics of the second state body, of the spirit body. We're going to start defining some terms and ideas that should be familiar to all of us as we are in the second state. So let's see what Dr. Monroe says. He says, the greatest proof of the existence of any particular phenomenon is consistency through repeated observation. Only through such reasonable, careful, analytical experiments, or as much as I could make them, did I come to the conclusion of the unqualified existence of the second body. I do presume that all of us have one. I cannot conceive of being that unique. If it exists, what is it like? What are its characteristics? Through several hundred tests, here are excerpts from his notes. Okay. So again, folks, these notes are from 1958, 1959, 1960. That's what we're reading from. These are the notes of Dr. Monroe before the Gateway Experience tapes were even created. This is him falling asleep in his bedroom, or falling asleep on the couch in his office, and just doing his own countdowns and figuring out how to get out of the body. So in his first note here, he says, it was as if my head had more weight than the rest of me, more gravitic attraction, but all of me was gently attracted to the earth. I still seemed to have weight, little as it was. So the first characteristic that he's saying here is that our second state body, our spirit body, has weight to it. Okay, in his next note, he says, I looked upward from where I left them, and I saw the shimmering outlines of my arms and hands in exactly the place they felt they were. I looked back at the folded arms, then at the bright shadow of them outstretched. I could see through them to the bookshelves beyond. It was like a bright, glowing outline which moved when I felt them move or made them move willfully. So what he's saying here is when he was having an out-of-body experience for this afternoon, he was taking his afternoon nap. Again, this is a great time to have some of these strange experiences because we're still wide awake as we kind of take these little naps, right? So he said, as he's seeing his spirit body's hands, he's looking at them. The second state has a glowing outline, but you can see your hands or your arms, but you can see through them almost like a ghost. So that's pretty interesting, right? He says here, I rubbed the outlined hands over each outlined forearm, and the arms felt normal, solid to the touch. I moved one outline hand to the shelf by the cot. I couldn't feel the shelf. My outline hand went right through it. So we've talked about that before. The spirit body, I've kind of described it as plasma. It feels like it's made out of electricity and water and gas all at the same time, right? And it feels like you can reach over and grab your own spirit body, but not necessarily feel the physical objects in locale 1, right? Locale 1, again, our real reality. When we first have our out-of-body experience, we are in locale 1 in our own real bedroom, able to turn around and look at our own physical body. He says when he was going back into his physical body, he says it felt exactly as if I had slipped on long-sleeved gloves, and then I could move my physical arms. So again, I've described that as when you return to your physical body, it's like you are sliding into a wetsuit, right? Your wetsuit, your physical body is there waiting for you, and you slide right back into it. It's very interesting. It's a great feeling. All of these things feel amazing. Okay, so, some people might think, oh, this sounds scary. It sounds weird. I don't know if I want to experience this. It feels wonderful, I promise. So it says here in a later note. Okay, so this one, before we start, Dr. Monroe talks about when he has an out-of-body experience, for the longest time, he felt like there would be someone standing behind him, right? He could feel their presence and hear them breathing. And it actually worried him for a while. He was kind of worried, like, what is this? What is this entity that's constantly behind me? And I kind of thought, like, when you're in line at the grocery store and someone's standing too close behind you, you haven't physically turned around to see that they're there. You haven't, like, nudged them with your elbow or anything, but you can physically tell that they're right there, right? And so he's saying this. It seemed that the one in back, the one I could hear and feel, was the physical I, and the I in front was the mental or real I. I assumed this because the physical sensations and related actions were in the near body, while thought was in the front eye, or in the rear body, sorry, and while thought was in the front eye. It was confusing, but very real. So what he's saying is, the person behind him that he's always feeling there, well, that's his physical body because he is his perception, right? We've talked about in the last 2 tapes. We're working on our perceptions leaving the body, right? Expanding outside of the body. And when it does that, your thought process, your spirit thought is going to be right above your physical body. And you're going to be able to hear yourself breathing. And you're going to have that feeling, again, of someone being behind you, but you don't have to worry. It's just your own physical body. Okay, so in this next note here, It says, after lying down and working through the count-up procedure, the vibrations surged in strong and rough and then smooth as they took on a more rapid frequency. They were speeding up, and he felt them as a sense of warmth. So again, that vibration that we feel, some people feel it as they're falling asleep. I often feel it as I'm waking up from the tapes. You have this vibrational sensation. It's like someone flicking the lights on and off as you're waking up. When the lights are on, you're awake. When the lights are off, you're asleep. And it's like someone's just doing it as fast as they can. And it creates this vibrating sensation in your body. And as the melatonin and all of these chemicals that are produced during sleep, as they kind of dissolve away, and now I think it's the cortisol that wakes us up, as those chemicals start to flow into our brain, I think it's kind of an on and off situation, and you start to wake up and the vibrations disappear. But I thought it was cool that he described them as feeling warm, right? Again, all the experiences that I've had, anytime I've done these tapes, I feel warmth, pain-free. It's a wonderful feeling, okay? It's not something to be afraid of. Okay, so in this next section, he talks about how when he was out of his physical body, he saw his second state, his spirit state arms, and he said, okay, can I, from where he was, can I touch the wall? And he was able to outstretch his arm, and as he thought about it, and as he pushed his arm outwards, his arm was able to reach the wall. It stretched out and touched the wall, and then when he stopped thinking about it, it just kind of came back to its original form, right? He also talked about how there is possibility that you could totally change your shape of the second state body into whatever you want it to be. And he says, let's see, you might convert temporarily into the shape of, for example, a cat or a dog. Could this be the source of the werewolf and the vampire bat mythology? Very interesting. Again, we're taking this scientific look at, some of the mythology that has been passed down to us through history, through all our mythology and our lore, and these characters. Is it something that where someone is having an out-of-body experience and they are consciously transforming themselves into werewolves or bats, right? And again, that stretching process, we talked about it in Wave 1, Tape 5, that sleep exploration. It feels like you are being stretched through the top of your head. Your perception is being stretched out of your body, okay? Let's see. In the next note, he says, something pulled me back to the physical, and I found myself in my bedroom, in the physical, the vibrations fading. The reason for recall was that my arm was asleep and tingling from lack of circulation. I was lying on it the wrong way. Okay, this is very important. Again, we've talked about when you are going to listen to the Gateway Experience tapes, the best thing to do is lay down flat in your bed, lay on your back, make sure your legs are straight, arms are straight. Don't cross your legs at the ankle or anything like that. Don't lay your arms across your chest. Any type of strain point, any body part that's going to lose circulation as you lay there for the 35 to 45 minutes of the extent of the tape. Any of those type of physical sensations, or like I talked about before, my feet being cold, right? These type of physical sensations are going to anchor you to your physical body, and they're going to completely take you out of the out-of-body experience. It's going to suck you right back into your body because there's something physical going on, right? So again, if this occurs, like with Wave 1, Tape 5, it took me 3 times. Don't get discouraged, right? Try again, make an adjustment, wait an hour, whatever it takes, but try again. Don't be discouraged, okay? Let's see. Okay. So these, I'm going to read through these next 2 things here. It says, everything was reversed like a mirror image. I never have thought myself to be handsome, but at least I thought I was a little better than this. Strange, the reversal. Okay, this is very interesting. So when you and I look into a mirror, we are seeing the reversed image of who we really are, right? When we take a selfie, we are looking at the reversed or mirrored image of who we truly are. When people look at us, right? When a family or friend comes over and looks at us, they see what is the reverse to us. And folks, it can be very shocking when you see what everyone else sees, right? So there's an app that will allow you to do that. It will basically flip your camera around in a way that you are now seeing not the mirror image of yourself, but the real image of yourself. And it's a lot of fun. There's tons of videos of people using this app going, wait, what? This is what everyone sees? I didn't see that. Who is this person in front of me? They don't even recognize themselves, right? And so what Dr. Monroe did here is during one of his experiments, he had the out-of-body experience. And instead of traveling somewhere, he just focused on his physical body. He said, you know what? I've glanced back and saw myself, but I've never really examined myself. And when he did, he found that he is the reverse image. Our spirit and our mind would see ourselves in a reversed image, and he thought it was very strange. Okay, so this next one, he says, what was it that pulled me back so defiantly or definitely? The cord I have read of? Okay. So what happened in this experiment, he is falling asleep, having his out-of-body experience. One of his family members comes and knocks on the door, and it felt like someone had pulled a cord and pulled him right back into his physical body. Now, we haven't experienced this yet, but we will in future tapes when you have one of your first out-of-body experiences, when your second state, when your spirit body is actually for the very first time floating 4 to 6 feet above your body, you're going to feel a cord connect from your brain, from your spirit brain to your physical brain, right? It feels almost like an umbilical cord, right? And no, that sounds very strange, but it's actually kind of comforting knowing it's there, knowing that you're not going to just float away from the physical, right? And so I think we are going to talk more about that in future episodes when we start to feel it ourselves. Okay, so in this next experiment here, Dr. Monroe is at some type of research lab that has what is called a Faraday cage. So a room, much like the Mind War Studios here, a small room, and all throughout the walls, there's going to be metal lattice. Think of like a chicken wire or, just a chain link fence built into the walls. And what that does is it interferes or completely blocks any type of Wi-Fi signals, any electrical signals from coming into the box, the Faraday cage, or from escaping the cage, right? And so he decided, I'm going to see what happens when I try to do astral travel while in a Faraday cage. And so he says, this was an experiment. I don't want to try again. I was in the charged Faraday cage, which is copper screen mesh above ground, in the DC charge of 50 kilovolts, kV, I believe. So in his Faraday cage, the copper wire was actually charged with 50 kV. I attempted to move through the cage. I got out of the physical, so he had his out-of-body experience. Then I seemed to be entangled in a large bag made of flexible wire. The bag gave when I pushed against it, but I couldn't go through it. I struggled like a trapped animal in a snare, and I finally went back into the physical. In thinking it over, quite evidently, it was not the wire itself, but the electrical field pattern set up in fundamentally the same shape as the cage, but more flexible. Maybe this could be the basis for a ghost catcher. Uh-oh. Hey, Call the Ghostbusters, folks. We're going to be making some ghost catchers here. But it's really important. So Dr. Monroe is saying that when he had his out-of-body experience in this charged Faraday cage, as he tried to leave, it felt like a net, but it wasn't the copper wire that was stopping him. It was the electricity itself that was capturing him inside of this, what he felt like a net, right? So very interesting. Okay, so in the next set of notes here, again, we're just talking about different characteristics of the second state body, of our spirit body. He says, I looked up at the approximate position I had been over the sidewalk and got a surprise. At just above the exact height I had floated over the sidewalk were power primaries containing fairly high voltage electrical current. And the question he asks is, do electrical fields attract this second body? So here's what happened. He's now back at home. He has his out-of-body experience. He's in locale 1, the real world, and he decides to travel through his city. He says he feels and pictures himself about 20 feet above the sidewalk as he's traveling through the center of his downtown, right? I think he was honestly going to try and visit a friend who was about 5 miles away. And so just like when you get into a car and you drive somewhere, that's what he was doing, right? And so when he got done, he got into his car and actually drove to his friend's house. And he had stopped at one point and recognized that where he felt himself floating was actually where the power lines were on the road. And so he's kind of asking here, does our second state body, does our spirit body, as we travel, is it attracted to these electrical currents that go through, all of our power lines, and can we use them as a means of transportation? Kind of interesting. So again, one of the characteristics is this electrical attraction, right? Okay, from another set of notes here. Okay, so this is back to the cord, right? The cord that goes from your spirit body, from the brain of your spirit body to the brain of your physical body. He's going to explain it more. He says, I turned to look for the cord, but it was not visible to me. Either it was too dark or not there. Then I reached around my head to see if I could feel it coming out of the front, top, or back of my head. As I reached the back of my head, my hand brushed against something, and I felt behind me with both hands. Whatever it was extended out from a spot in my back directly between my shoulder blades, as nearly as I can determine, not from the head as I expected. So he's saying that his spirit body, he was able to reach behind him, and he said the cord wasn't necessarily in his head, but maybe more between his shoulders, and he reached back and actually could feel the cord. Again, it's a spirit body feeling this spiritual cord that's connected between the second state body and the physical body. He says he expected it to be at the actually in his brain, but he felt it at the base of his shoulders, and it felt exactly like a spread out roots of a tree radiating out from the basic trunk. The roots slanted outward and into my back, down as far as the middle of my torso, up to my neck and into the shoulders of each side. I reached outward, and it formed into a cord. If you can call a 2-inch thick cable a cord. It was hanging loosely, and I could feel its texture very definitely. It was body warm to the touch and seemed to be composed of hundreds or thousands of tendon-like strands packed neatly together, but not twisted or spiraled. It was flexible, and it seemed to have no skin covering. Satisfied that it did exist, I took off and went. So he's saying that almost you can think of the muscle in your arm or the muscles in your legs, long tendons all in a row. He said it almost felt like that. I mean, that's such an interesting way to describe it. It makes me think of like horror movies or sci-fi movies and things like that. Very interesting way to describe this cord. He says the basic characteristics noted have been confirmed many other times in various ways by other people, right? Sharing their experiences. Still, there appears to be no method to validate such evidence except by personal experience and observation by others. Perhaps this will come in time. And again, I'm not here trying to convince you of the experiences I've had. I'm not here trying to convince you of the experiences Dr. Monroe's had. All I'm doing is trying to say, have your own experiences, right? And when you do, here are some of the characteristics that have been familiar to all of us who have gone through the tapes, had these type of out-of-body experiences, right? These are some of the things we find familiar. Okay, so now he wants to go back and we're going to review those characteristics and put them into more scientific terms here, right? He says, the first characteristic, the second body has weight as we understand it. It is subject to gravitational attraction, although much less than the physical body. So the very first characteristic of the second state body, our spirit body, is that it has weight. Second, he says the spirit body is visible under certain conditions. To be visible, it must either reflect or radiate light in the known spectrum, or at least a harmonic in this area. Based upon the report in the arms and legs experiment, I seem to be viewing radiated light, but only around the parameter of the body form. So the second characteristic of our spirit body is that it seems to be radiating light. You have this outline of your spirit body, and you can see it by the radiating light around it. He says there evidently are conditions where a fully conscious observer can be visually aware of the presence of your second body. So what he's talking about here is that they believe they have evidence or experiences between themselves, right? So this is people who have gone into the out-of-body state. They're in their spirit body. They're doing some type of traveling, whether it's locale 1, 2, or 3, and they are visiting someone, right, in the real world, and that person was able to see their spirit body or a representation of it. So again, this goes back to those mythology ideas. If someone is having an out-of-body experience and they are shaping themselves into a werewolf or a vampire or some type of creature from mythology, and someone else sees it as like a ghost apparition, oh boy, folks, we're getting into some interesting territory. Okay, the third characteristic of our spirit body is the sense of touch. Seems to be very familiar to that in the physical. When the hands felt each other, the sensation seemed identical. The same seemed true in the report for the search of the cord. So again, the third characteristic of our second state body, of our spirit body, is that we can physically touch it. We can feel it. Okay, the fourth characteristic of our spirit body is it's very plastic and may take whatever form is suitable to be any form that is suitable or desired by the individual. The ability to stretch out the arm to 3 times its normal length points to such elasticity. Extrapolated, one could conceive of the entire non-physical travel as the incredible stretching out of some substance emanating from the physical. So again, wave 1, tape 5. You have this stretching feeling. You feel like you're being stretched, pulled out of your physical body, but not disconnected from it in any way. Just your perception is being stretched. And so is that what we're doing when we do travel? Is it just a stretching of our spirit body from the physical? The fifth characteristic of our second state body is that it is a direct reversal of the physical. Again, we're not seeing our mirrored self. We're seeing our true selves. We're not looking in the mirror when we are outside of our physical body. We are as if we were a different person looking at ourselves and seeing ourselves for what we truly look like. So the sixth characteristic here is the direct investigation tends to support the premise of the connecting cord between the physical and the second state body, as described many times through the ages in esoteric literature. That's right, folks. As we get into future seasons of Mind War and start to combine the scientific processes that we're learning here in the Gateway Experience with our esoteric and occultic spiritual teachings, it's going to start, really starting to be able to explain some of these long-held beliefs and stories that we've heard all throughout humanity, all throughout the history of mankind. You hear about these occult and esoteric things occurring, these special abilities that people have. We're figuring them out here. This is what we're doing. We're decoding them. We're trying to come at them in a scientific way. And as we get into future seasons, I'm going to show you, just like I did last night, through my spiritual practice after listening to these tapes, they are definitely combined. You can use them together. And the seventh and last characteristic of our spirit body is the relationship between the second body and electricity or electromagnetic fields is quite significant. So again, our second state body, our spirit body, may have some electrical component, or at least there is an electrical attraction to electricity. Okay, so that was chapter 13. Very interesting chapter. We started to look at the characteristics of the second state or the spirit body. And we were reading through Dr. Monroe's notes. As you go through the tapes, make sure that you start to write down some of the characteristics that you run into with your second state body. Are they the same as what Dr. Monroe has here that he's displayed, or are you having new characteristics that may be familiar to all of us? Make sure you share. Chapter 14, Mind and Supermind. Having described the physical aspects of the second body, it would seem most important to examine how the mind apparently operates in reaction to the second body experience. He says the experiences differ from the typical dream state principally in the following ways. Number one, continuity of some sort of conscious awareness. Okay, so when you are in the second state, when you are in your spirit body, our physical body is deeply asleep. This is part of hypnosis. Our mind is wide awake and conscious, and that's the difference. Normally, when we fall asleep and we dream, we are unconscious of those dreams. That's what we're doing here in the Gateway Experience tapes. We are learning how to stay awake and stay conscious while our body sleeps, and we move into the dream world, that locale 2, and we are able to consciously control and understand where we are and what we're doing. Number 2, he says intellectual or emotional decisions made during the experiences. In the beginning, because this is the first time that you're going to feel these feelings and have these experiences, they're very emotional. Again, we've already talked about, like in Wave 1 Tape 4, when we deal with our fear, these tapes, what we're doing here, it's part of self-help. It's parallel to therapy, right? That's what these very first tapes are all about. We're not even getting to the out-of-body experience yet. We're not doing the astral travel yet. That's a whole different thing. But right now, we have to prepare ourselves for that. And one of those ways is, again, through this kind of self-help. And it's very emotional in the beginning. Going through the tapes the way I am now, here with you on a schedule like this, and this being really the second time I've gone through the tapes, my first journey through them was very emotional. I was dealing with all sorts of emotions that had been building up for over 20 years as I had my professional career and kind of lived my other life. And now I was here to kind of explore everything that happened and deal with those emotions that I kind of had to suppress, being a Marine and a professional a husband and a father. There's a lot of work to do. You can't always have the emotions that you want to have. So that's what I did during my first experience with the Gateway Experience tapes. It was very emotional to me. This time I'm able to have more of an intellectual and logical view of it. I'm able to kind of better understand what is happening, why it's happening, and again, categorize it, right? So number 3 here, it says multi-valued perception via sensory inputs or their equivalents. So one of the interesting things that we deal with is that when we're in our spirit body, when we're in our second state body, the only way that we're actually, confident with experiencing life is through our 5 senses, the senses of our physical body. But when we're in our spirit body, we're not physically feeling things, right? We're not physically hearing things, okay? Those senses aren't actually working in the second state body. So we have to learn how to perceive in a new way. It's very interesting. Non-recurrence of identical patterns. So basically not just having the same dream over and over again, you're experiencing new things. And the development of events in sequence that seem to indicate a time lapse. So over time, whether it's one kind of long experience that you're having during one tape, or maybe you go back and you're visiting the same location over and over again, there seems to be a time lapse happening. Things seem to be happening in sequence. This is very different than dreams, which just seem kind of, discombobulated. We're just, our mind is wandering, and the dreams don't really seem like they have a kind of purpose, right? So the most certain statement that can be made is that when the condition exists, you are aware of not dreaming. You are as aware of not dreaming as when you are awake. The same standards of wakefulness can be applied with the same positive results. You are wide awake when you're having these experiences. Your physical body is asleep, but your conscience is wide awake. Again, the ultimate proof of such affirmation is to experience oneself in this state of being. I'm not here to convince you of my experiences. I'm not here to convince you of Dr. Monroe's experiences. I'm simply asking you to have your own. Is this a product of self-hypnosis with attendant post-hypnotic suggestion? Quite probably the method of induction and establishment of the condition relates to hypnosis in many ways. Hypnosis itself is a phenomenon of which very little is understood. Suggestion is employed in hypnosis. Suggestion as employed in hypnosis may be part of the activation process. However, great care has been taken to avoid any indirect suggestion or any stimuli that would induce a hallucinated experience. So again, he's asking, is this simply the result of being hypnotized? Is he hypnotizing himself and as he falls asleep suggesting that this is what he's going to see? Is he trying to tell himself that? In some ways, it can be. When you are putting yourself into a hypnotic state, just like we've learned in past tapes, you're going to go in with your purpose. Why are you going into this? In a way, you're going to hypnotize yourself. You're going to view yourself as accomplishing your project, as completing your task, right? And you're going to, in a way, again, hypnotize yourself into being that successful person who's already completed it, because without imagination, there is no manifestation. He says here that all the primary subjective drives are strongly evident, demanding to be heeded or satisfied. It is impossible to deny their existence. Basic fears which you believe to be erased are the first to come forth. These are followed or joined by the equally strong drive for sexual union, which will be examined elsewhere. Together, these present two solid strikes against continued development of the second state. Throughout mankind's history, fear and sexuality have been the major motivating and control characteristics in all forms of social organization. It is therefore understandable that they play such a vital part of the second state. What he's talking about here is that the physical body requires certain things, right? And when we first start having these experiences, they can be fearful. We have to overcome that first, and then we have to overcome those other urges in our body. He focuses here on sexuality, but it could be anything. Hunger, cold, are you over-caffeinated? Whatever it might be, those physical things are going to take you out of it. Here he says, this is not to say that the conscious mind is in full control of the second state. Rather, it is merely a modulator of a master or driving force. Who is the master? Call it the supermind, soul, greater self. That label isn't important. Okay, so now we're kind of talking about the difference between the spirit and the soul, the conscience and your soul. He's saying that when you're in the second state, when you're having your out-of-body experience, there is still this kind of guide with you. There's still this kind of other part of you there that you don't necessarily have full control of, but they're there to guide you and help you, and that's your soul, right? Our soul may be very different than our consciousness. The source of knowledge of the supermind leads down many avenues, most of which seem beyond our conscious mind world perception. Heredity is the most acceptable of these and the most insufficient. So one of the things that he's talking about for those of us who are able to have these experiences, and hopefully all of you will, maybe it's part of hereditary. Maybe it's people in our past who have had some of these same experiences, and it's passed down through our DNA. That's very interesting. So here he says, conversely, if your thought habits have been in other directions, you may take whatever form is most convenient, deliberately or otherwise. I suspect that one may modify the second state body into whatever form is desired. Once the thought is discarded, the second body will drop back into its habitual humanoid shape. This opens up some interesting speculation into man's mythology. If one wished to experience the existence of a quadruped, something that walks on four legs, the second body might be transformed temporarily into a large dog, and someone with second state vision, aka someone who is here in the real world, but can see people who are in their second state body. They're able to see ghosts, basically, the spirit body. Would they be encountering a werewolf? Again, right? Or the fables of half man, half goat, half horse could be the result. One might think wings and fly and be transformed momentarily into a vampire bat. It seems less impossible than when one experiments with the power and thought of the second state. So again, can we transform our second state body into any shape that we want? And if we do, have people in the past, through our hereditary, through our ancestry, have they learned how to transform that second state body into something that looks like a werewolf or a vampire or whatever? And then as they travel through locale one, are people seeing them? Are people able to see this shape? And is that where these ideas, this mythology of werewolves and vampires possibly come from? And here he says perception changes. This is the area of most significant yet most incomprehensible alteration. Because we have learned no other way of dealing with it, all sensory input is translated at first into terms and meanings appreciated by the five physical senses. For example, when one begins to see in this unfamiliar shape, the impression is that this seeing is much the same as optical reception by the physical eyes. Only later do you discover empirically that this was not the case. It isn't physically seen at all. You learn that you can see in all directions at once without turning the head, that you can see, but don't see according to the thought, and that when examined objectively, it is more an impression of radiation rather than a reflection of light waves. So again, like we talked about in tape 1 or in wave 2, tape 1, where our perception is starting to expand. I talked about how we no longer just perceive forward through our eyeballs, but we're able to perceive in all directions, right? The same applies to the other physical senses. You're not actually hearing someone speak to you when you're having these experiences. If you are interacting with other beings or entities or other people, right? It's more that telepathy. He says here, the most frustrating part of this is that the communicant rarely has any memory of it afterwards. It is only with the difficulty that such contact is opened with a person physically awake. It is like trying to rouse a person from a sound, deep sleep. It may be that this communicating portion of the mind is actually asleep during periods of physical consciousness. Free association or regressive hypnotic techniques should bring recall from such sources when needed. So he's talking about in the out-of-body experience, you are visiting somebody in locale 1, the here and now, and you're trying to communicate with them. He said it's very difficult when they're awake, when their physical body is awake and they're going throughout their life. It's hard to talk with them. It's almost like you have to wake them up out of a sleep. And then when you go and say, hey, did you hear me? What did I communicate to you? They said it's unconscious, that often that they don't know, but maybe through hypnosis, they could then be, there could be a recall of what was actually said. Let's see here. Of the few facts that have been properly tagged, there are the flying and falling dreams. I am quite certain that such dreams are but memories of some degree of the second state experience. So again, with falling dreams, he says that falling dreams were also repeatedly examined in my early experience. It is common feeling in quick reintegration of the second body with the physical. So again, I've talked about how when you start to have your out-of-body experience and your second state body starts to form, it feels like it's floating upwards. And at the same time, your physical body feels like it's falling backwards. And your body actually produces the same chemicals as if your physical body really was feeling. There's some kind of adrenaline there. It feels very interesting. It feels like your physical body's falling backwards while your spirit body is moving forwards. So that was chapters 13 and 14 of Journeys Out of the Body. Again, chapter 13 was the second body, where we looked at the characteristics of the second body. We started to kind of label those characteristics. And then chapter 14 was the mind and supermind, where we looked at what it means to actually perceive while we're in that second state, because we're not perceiving with our own physical senses, but we're trying to communicate to others our experiences by saying, this is what it felt like, but it's very different. It's different than the 5 physical senses that we have in our physical body. When we get back, folks, we are going to move on to Wave 2 Threshold, Tape 2, Problem Solving. And we'll dive deep into that tape after a word from our sponsor. Mind War is sponsored by Victory Work Apparel. Use promo code Mind War. Welcome back, folks. Okay, so we're going to dive into Wave 2 Threshold, Tape 2 Problem Solving. Okay, so Dr. Monroe says begin with your preparatory process. We've talked about that. He says you're going to move into focus 10 and then you're going to move into focus 12, just the way that he has told you by counting from 10 to 12. And he says, now in focus 12, we're going to take the question or problem that you have brought with you, take it and cast it out into your total awareness and wait for the best answer or solution to come back to you clearly and distinctly. Take the question or problem that you have brought with you and cast it out into your total awareness and wait for the best answer or solution to come back to you clearly and distinctly. Do it now. Okay. So in this tape, again, we are working on expanding our awareness, expanding our perception, not our not our second state body, not our spirit body, just our awareness and our perception. And again, it feels a lot like that stretching experience, right? He's using the rocket ship. It starts from the bottom left and it flies across out into the distance to the right, and you hear it through your headphones. And so I did this tape last night. It was absolutely amazing. I had combined it with some enhancements that truly brought it to life. The experience that I had was really amazing. And I guess there was kind of two sides to it. The first part was, again, that upward expansion of awareness. And it was so interesting that it was literally pulling, it felt like it was pulling my full physical body up and backwards, right? And my physical eyes were still looking forwards. But what happened, it was kind of strange. It was like, think of yourself sitting in a movie theater, but instead of the screen being in front of you, the screen was all the way behind you and on the ceiling. So my perception went upwards. I was looking back, right? And I'm looking all the way back at this screen, right? And now on the screen, this is where the dream state started to occur. And so I kind of had to be careful and remember, don't just fall asleep into the dream. We're focusing on our question. We brought a problem because again, this is part of the self-help aspect of the Gateway Experience tapes. Wave 2, tape 2, we are bringing a problem with us, right? So for me, I didn't quite know what problem to bring. I almost really didn't know what I was going to be working on. So I just kind of allowed myself to go into this problem solving state. And my mind was very all over the place, very scattered. I was thinking about 100 different things at one time, right? And so the answer that came back to me, some of you have probably guessed it already, was simply, Victor, you need to quiet your mind. You need to remind yourself once in a while to take time to quiet the mind through meditation or whatever you need to do, right? Because folks, like so many of you out there, I'm addicted to the phone. I catch myself doom scrolling for an hour at a time, and I just hate when I look back and see that time was wasted. I have to admit I've been playing quite a bit of video games lately, something I haven't done in quite a long time, but I kind of signed back up on the Xbox and have been playing over the last month. And it really was kind of like, it was the answer that I received for my problem, again, was quiet the mind, but also don't be too hard on yourself. Don't, look down on it because you've wasted time scrolling on your phone or playing video games or whatever it is. Because ultimately, we do need that time. We need the time to rest and just kind of, not have any worries or anything, just get caught up in the movie or whatever it is we're doing. So we don't want to punish ourselves for that. But again, for me personally, it was, hey, quiet the mind and then make sure that you are staying focused and you're not allowing yourself to be distracted too much, right? And so Dr. Monroe says, you will, so then he gives you time after he says, do it, send it out into your perception. So again, our perception and our awareness have been, expanded out of our physical body. There is no second state body that's created. It's just our awareness. It's our thinking. We are thinking outside of our own body, right? And it's very strange. It's hard to explain it, right? Again, this idea of kind of looking up, being stretched out of the body. And I didn't quite realize what state I was actually in until the end of the tape. And we'll get there in a second. But when he says, hey, send your problem out into your expanded awareness, that's exactly what you do. It's like as you're thinking about it, as you're saying it in your mind, you can almost see and hear the words going off, and they just disappear out into the darkness, right? And then again, you consciously allow that answer to come back. For me, it was calm the mind, right? And so he gives you some time to think and allow the answer to come back. And then when he comes back on the mic, he says, you will consciously remember the answer or solution you have received. You will consciously remember the best answer or solution you have received. And now he says, repeat the process once again for better clarification and verification. Send your question or problem out through the entire awareness that is you, through your entire awareness, and wait for the best answer or solution, which will come back to you clearly and distinctly, and you will understand it. Do this now, right? So again, it's very interesting. When you get into this state, you feel your awareness expanding outside of your body. So now he says, because again, he often allows us to do these things multiple times to make sure that we're getting the right answer or solving multiple problems at a time. And again, this is a great tape to come back to when new problems arise in your life. You may have to revisit this tape over and over. He says, okay, so if at any point in the future, when you are physically wide awake and desire the best answer to a question or problem, all you need to do is inhale deeply, pulling fresh energy into your physical head, and hold your breath. Think of the number, it looks like 1 here, but I think he's saying think of the number 12, and then the question or problem. When you do this and exhale, let's see. When you do this and exhale, you will consciously know the best answer to the question or problem. Okay. See, now here it says think of the number 13. So he does say think of a number. So again, these are one of those skills that we can use in the conscious mind. When you have a problem in your daily life, you're going about real world daily life things, you're having a problem with something, he's saying, stop what you're doing, take a deep breath, hold it in your mind, think of the problem, release the problem or the question, and as you exhale, the answer will come to you. And the more we perform this process, the more it will, the better at it that we'll get. And it's so interesting. Again, I believe that all of these techniques that we're learning here are distraction techniques. If you are having a problem with something, if you're trying to fix something, and it's just not working and you can't get the part where it needs to go, and you're aggravated and you're trying to force it and things just aren't working and things are getting worse and now you're more and more agitated, that's the state of being that we're in. We're in a state of being that's going to lead towards failure and disaster. So what he's saying here is that we're going to distract ourselves. We're going to take just a moment to take a deep breath, relax, and when we do, through that distraction of being angry and upset that this thing isn't working, the answer is going to come to us. I know it sounds strange. I've done it several times, right? We've learned how to find things when we lose them. I've done that. And I've done this before too, multiple times when you're working on something and you're just like, how am I going to do this? By taking that break distracting yourself for a moment and allowing, instead of that emotional side of your brain to be controlling your thought patterns, you're going to distract it for a moment and say, oh, what's the logical answer to what I need to really do here, right? And so he reminds us how to do that a few times. And then he says that you will return now to focus 10 by the method that we learned, by counting slowly in your mind from 12 to 10, right? And then, so as we go from 12 to 10, right, this is where I really kind of understood, okay, this is the second state, the spirit state that you're in tape 2 or in wave 2, tape 2, okay? The best way that I could describe it is in the beginning of the tape when the rocket ship takes off, as it's going from your left to your right, it's again that kind of log rolling feel. But for me, what I realized is that it's almost like my physical body had a hinge on it, and the top half of it kind of opened up and started looking that way. I just opened wide up. And from outside of me was almost like static electricity, static light was just kind of emanating outwards. Last night, the things that I saw in my closed eyes were very bright. It was a very bright night instead of a lot of darkness. And this may have been from the enhancements, right? The THC and the psilocybin. It was very bright, kind of reminded me again of like static on a television, or like felt kind of like electricity or static electricity. And this was, again, the representation of the awareness expanding. Not so much the spirit body, which is more like this physical kind of plasma thing that's radiating that you can see and move. This was more just your awareness shooting out like electricity or shooting out like static, right? Like just kind of a white light. It was very interesting and it felt pretty amazing. And I didn't realize that I had gone that far into this feeling, right? Having this type of experience until he said, now that we're going to count down from 12 to 10, right? As he's doing that, you hear the spaceship that disappeared off into the right. You hear it now starting to land, right? You hear it coming down, coming to the launch pad. And as it did, it was as if that top of my physical body kind of hinged backwards, right? And now it's hinging back on top. And as it was happening, all that static electricity that was my awareness, it started to kind of die out and be, consumed back into the physical body. And now, I feel my physical body fully there. Now it's darker. It's the same as if you're just laying there with your eyes closed. That brightness, that electrical feel, that external outward awareness, that perception that was shooting outward is now back into the physical body. I was right back, just as if I'm laying in bed, wide awake with my eyes closed. It was a completely different feeling. And it was really shocking because, again, I was like, man, I didn't even know that that's how far I had gone, how explosive this energy was feeling, how radiating this kind of awareness electricity was. And it's your whole body. That's what you think of. It's just that expanding outwards, right? So again, he talks us back into focus 10. Focus 10 is that first kind of level of hypnosis. Our body is asleep. Our mind is wide awake. It literally is like just laying in bed with your eyes closed and allowing your body to kind of be tired, right? And it's a very comforting, it's a beautiful feeling, but it was very different than what it was to be in focus 12, in that expanded state of awareness and perception. Very different. It was very strange. It kind of caught me off guard coming back into the physical body, or really kind of the physical body closing, right? Closing itself and saying, hey, okay, bring that awareness back into you. Now you're more conscious of your physical body. You're kind of, again, perceiving out of your own eyes and understanding, oh, I'm back in the physical body now. And then, of course, Dr. Monroe ends the tape the same way he ends all of them, by telling us that when we wake up, we're going to be revitalized and healthy. Our body's going to be functioning perfectly. So this tape, again, wave 2 threshold, tape 2 problem solving. It's an important tape. You can revisit it multiple times if there's an issue that's come up in your life. You can go through, you expand your awareness, you send that question out into the universe, and then you patiently wait and receive the answer. And when you do, you're consciously going to remember that answer. Again, for me, it was quieting the mind, staying focused on my tasks, and through my spiritual work that I did later on, I learned that I need to better delegate. And for me, because I am a one-man team here in the Mind War Studios, it was more of saying, hey, maybe that version of you that's been playing video games so much, maybe you need to delegate him some other work. Or maybe that version of you that's doom scrolling on the phone for an hour at a time, maybe you need to delegate that version of you to do other things, right? And it's these type of answers that you're going to learn through this problem solving. It's very interesting. It might not necessarily be something concrete, but let's say that you are a scientist or a mathematician or whatever problem it is that you're working on, and you just can't find that solution. This is how you do it. You put yourself into another state of being, into another state of mind, and allow yourself to think differently. That's what that really means, folks. That's what that slogan, think differently, means. You're going to think in a different way. Instead of here in the physical body, frustrated with the failure, the problem, the task, the hurdle that's in front of you, it's just not working. Instead of being angry about it, being tired and sweaty and hungry and frustrated and just wanting to solve this, instead of making whatever that problem is worse, we're going to take a step back. We're going to listen to wave 2, tape 2, the problem solving. We're going to release that problem out into the universe through our expanded awareness, and we're going to allow the answers to come back to us. And we're going to be confident in those answers. And we're going to listen to them and do what they say. And that's where real change starts, because those answers are just coming from us. No one knows what's better for us than we do. No one knows how to change the aspects of ourselves that we don't like better than we do. We know the answers, okay? But they're often hidden by our egos, by our addictions, by our suffering, whatever it is in this world that's distracting us. And lying to us about what the real answers are. We know what we need to do to be our very best selves, right? We know it deep down inside. And sometimes it takes this, getting into these states of being, listening to the Gateway Experience tapes, and using them as that self-help tool to find those real answers, folks. And I hope that's something that you're doing. And if you're out there listening to the tapes, you're having these experiences, you're taking your notes, share them with others. Remember, like we learned in season 1, be careful about propagandizing family and friends with all these amazing experiences that you're having. They might not understand it properly. It may go against some of their religious or cultural or societal ideas, and they kind of may be frightened by it. We don't want to scare those closest around us, right? So that's why people like myself, there's others out there who are listening to the Gateway Experience tapes, making videos just like I am about their experiences, communicate with us. There is a community of people out there that you can talk to when you're having these experiences, right? And please share them with others. That's a very important step. And I appreciate you being here, folks. This has been a really successful season so far. I'm really proud of the work that we've been doing. I appreciate you being here. And as always, remember, folks, harden your hearts and open your minds, because this is Mind War.